How you feel about Diddy being indicted?
Sean Puffy Combs' indictment. I had made a comment on my social media earlier today because I was a little disappointed in the fact that so many of our people misinterpreted my comments about Sean Puffy Combs as being indicative of my desire to see him evade accountability for any crimes that he may have committed. So, to clarify that, this is where I stand on the Sean Puffy Combs indictment. If Sean Puffy Combs is guilty on any of the three counts of that federal indictment, if he's guilty of sexually trafficking people against their will, if he's guilty of participating in arson and bribery and kidnapping and all of these things that they're accusing him of, if they can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that he engaged in these things, then like anyone else, if you do the crime, you should do the time. But when I look at those indictments, first of all, when I look at the racketeering count of the indictment, and of course, I'm not an attorney, but when I look at racketeer influence corrupt organization, I'm saying to myself, Sean Combs, from what I understand, because I don't know the man personally, he did not build Bad Boy on criminal money. Bad Boy was built legitimately through the legal channels of the music industry. He might have engaged in crime using Bad Boy property after he built Bad Boy, but did he use criminal funding in crime to create Bad Boy? I don't think he did. Now, maybe RICO extends to you simply engaging in crime on company time. Now, if they're saying he sexually trafficked women on company time and that constitutes RICO, then he might be guilty. But everybody who knows Puff knows that he came into the music industry the right way. He hustled the right way, and he built his empire the right way. It appears that all the freak offs in the alleged sexual trafficking, the alleged interstate prosecution, that may have come after the fact. So the question becomes, can he still be convicted of RICO charge if he simply engaged in sexual activities that did not directly have to do with the business, but he did it on company time? He did it in company property. So that would be a clarifying issue that I would like to see explained. So that's one piece. Now, when I look at the sexual trafficking, again, he could be innocent, he could be guilty. But when I look at a Sean Puffy Combs being a mogul, being as popular who he is, as he is, I don't see why he would need to kidnap people and sexually traffic them across state lines and then force them to engage in sexual behavior. I really can't see that. Again, I'm not saying he's innocent. I'm not saying he's guilty. I'm simply saying, as thirsty as people can be, men and women, for fame, for attention, I don't think Sean Puffy Combs has to force anybody, okay, into sexual trafficking. I don't see him needing to sell people against their will across state lines to engage in sex. I don't see it. I do not believe he's guilty of sex trafficking, but I could be wrong because I don't know what the evidence is. So the racketeering piece, I'm a little uncertain of. The sex trafficking piece, on the surface, I don't believe he's guilty of that because I don't think he needs to forcibly sell anybody or traffic anyone. Now, the third count of the federal indictment is where I think they might can get him. Interstate prostitution. Did Sean Puffy Combs influence people, pay people, bribe people to come across state lines and engage in sexual activity? He may very well be guilty of that. So then the question becomes, for me, what is the maximum he can get? Fed time for engaging in interstate prostitution. And interestingly, when you look at the federal definition of prostitution, it does not require an exchange of money. It could be a promise, It could be a material benefit. And you know, Puffy, he kind of flashy. All the hip hop guys who got money, they pretty flashy. So he might say, hey, if you do this, I'll give you this. Or what if he just gave them rewards for complying with his request? In other words, there was no upfront business arrangement for sex. There was no upfront business arrangements for sex. Hypothetically, he brings them into New York. He brings them into LA. He brings them into Miami. They do what they do. And as a means of him of flexing his power and his money, I'm going to buy you this car. I'm going to take care of your bills. She wasn't expecting nothing but time with Puff. She wasn't expecting nothing but participation in the freak off. But because she was rewarded for her participation in the freak off, does that meet the federal definition of prostitution? It's the same thing with my RICO charge question. I don't believe he built his music empire illegally, but if he engaged in illegal activity non-related to the music empire, but he used music empire property to do it, does that also meet the federal definition of a RICO charge? And me personally, Art, I believe the reason they went RICO and the reason they went Fed is they want to completely destroy Sean Puffy Combs publicly and financially, because this could have very easily been state charges. The feds don't come in quickly to take up cases. They came in and took this up. And as you know, the feds have a 97% conviction rate. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying somebody wants Sean Puffy Combs completely destroyed. And I think I know who it is. I believe it is Diego. I believe it is the British-based liquor company that Puffy was doing business with. They're one of the biggest liquor companies in the world. They market and sell some of the most popular brands of liquor, including Ciroc. And Diddy had an agreement with them where they would help him market his De Leon tequila brand. And Diddy took issue with Diego because they had described the De Leon tequila liquor, Puffy's brand. They described it to their customer base as if it was an inner city, urban, quote unquote, ghetto, hip hop type of liquor. And Puffy took issue with that because he said, I'm a global icon. I'm a hip hop mogul. Don't limit my product just to black people. And by doing that, you're dissuading white people and non-blacks from buying my liquor. You're cutting my sales low. And I think you're doing it on purpose because you don't want De Leon tequila to outsell all your other European controlled brands. So Puffy accused Diego of racial discrimination in advertising and marketing. Diego got upset with Puff, British-based company. They said, you done already made $1 billion off of us. How dare you sue us and try to make a few more billion off of us? So they tried to get the case thrown out. But the judge allowed the case to proceed because Diego claimed that there was a clause in their contract with Puff that did not allow him to ever take them to court. Any grievances, according to the contract, Diego alleges needed to be solved outside of court. But the judge sided with Puff and allowed the lawsuit to go forward. So Diego is losing black money because of this racial discrimination piece. Other companies don't want to do business with them because they don't want to be branded as anti-black, even if they are, because everybody knows we disproportionately spend more money on liquor than any other group. So Diego is losing money. Then on top of that, Puff then already made $1 billion off of him. And now Puff is suing him for a few more billion. So what do? They decide to settle out of court. Now check this out. Diego and Puff settled out of court in January 2024. Puffy's homes are raided in March. There's no way you're going to convince me that a company that powerful, Diego operates in 180 of 194 countries in the world. They operate in 180 out of 194 countries in the world. You are not going to convince me that 1 + 1 does not equal 2. There is no way they were forced to settle with Puffy in January, and less than 2 months later, his homes are raided. And I'm going to tell you how I believe Puffy gave them the ammunition to go after him, Art. When Cassie made her accusations against Puff, he settled in about 24 hours. And they settled in November of 2023. Mind you, he's already in court with Diego since the spring of 2023. Watch this timeline. He sues Diego in the spring. Cassie comes out in the fall. He settles with Cassie in 24 hours. Diego is watching this. So when Diego decides to settle with Puff outside of court, they did this knowing full well we about to go after you and destroy you. You are messing with the Illuminati. You have no idea who you effing with, Sean Combs. And when Puff was so quick to settle with Cassie, that showed the whole world he was vulnerable. That showed the whole world he had skeletons in his closet. And do you know what I think Diego did after they settled with Puff? I bet you after they settled with Puff, they probably never even made it to the airplane. They picked up the phone and they called King Charles III. And they said, "Dear monarch, we need you to dial in a favor for us to President Joe Biden. Because this Sean Puffy Combs, this little nigga out of New York City, he think he can go to war with the big boys and not pay the consequences. Sean Puffy Combs, that hip hop king out of New York, he think he can tell white people what to do. He think he going to rob us for a couple $1 billion and get away with it. It's not going down. Dear King, please make that call on behalf of your citizens." That's what I believe happened. King Charles picked up the phone. He called Joe Biden or any number of U.S. citizens, any number of U.S. prosecutors. In less than 2 months after Puffy settled with Diego, his homes were raided. Now, here's the other thing, Art. The reason they did not arrest Puffy until recently, because they could have arrested him then, is they wanted to wait and save this for a time they needed to distract the black public away from something that they didn't need us getting involved in. The reason he got arrested now is because we're 6 weeks away from the presidential election, and Black America was tearing Kamala Harris's ass up looking for presidential accountability. They were all over Kamala Harris. She couldn't answer no questions. She didn't want to do no interviews. And so the power structure said, let's get him right now. We need something we can throw at Black America. We know they're emotional. We know they care more about hip hop than anything else in their community. Okay, what can we throw Black America to get them off of Kamala Harris's back? Let's throw them Puff. And if you notice, Art, ever since Kamala decided to seek the presidential nomination when Joe Biden stepped down, every conversation in Black Twitter, Black Facebook, Black Instagram, Black TikTok, Black YouTube, everything has been about what? The presidential election. Trump, Kamala, Kamala, Trump. That's all we've been talking about until they arrested Puff. Now go on Black Twitter. Now go on Black Instagram. Now go on Black YouTube. Nobody's talking about Kamala too much no more. Everybody's worried about Puff. That's exactly what they wanted to do. Distract Black America away from the presidential election by throwing them the Puffy lynching so we can get Kamala to the finish line. And guess what? The judges that refused to give Puffy bail, from my understanding, they're both Democrats. And you know what's so sad about that? Puffy is a very big Democratic Party contributor. He's a very big Democratic Party supporter. And so the very party that Puff been giving millions to and millions of dollars worth of publicity and advertising is the very party that shut him down. This was a favor that was called in by the British people to the American government. He don't know his place no more. Sit his ass down and keep on top of that, Art. Puffy started a black political party called, what was it called? Our Black Party, I think it was, in 2020. After he endorsed Joe Biden, Sean Puffy Combs said out of his own mouth that both political parties keep taking us for granted. They're not offering us anything for our vote. And I think another reason why he was raided when he was raided, Art, was to keep his damn mouth shut so he did not offer his opinion on this presidential election. This whole thing was a takedown of the global white power structure with Diego British-based company at the top, and it was also necessary in order to get Black America off of Kamala Harris's back. Now, let me say this to you, Art. People say Dr. Umar has been defending Puff. If Sean Puffy Combs is guilty of sex trafficking, he should go to jail. If Sean Puffy Combs is guilty of engaging in anything illegal. I'm slow, Art, because I'm saying that the prostitution piece, if somebody wants to get paid for sex, although I don't agree with it, I don't agree he should go to jail for that if it was consensual. So I'm hesitating on the prostitution charge because if they did this of their own free will in exchange for commerce, even though prostitution is illegal in every state except Nevada, I can't see somebody going down for prostitution when it was a consensual arrangement. The RICO, if he kidnapped people, if he burned people's houses and things down unjustifiably, I could potentially see that as well. But my thing is this. You have Black people saying that even if he's innocent of the federal charges, he should go to jail anyway for stomping out Cassie. He should go to jail anyway for taking advantage of people. He should go to jail anyway because we think he has something to do with Big. We think he has something to do with Pac. We think he has something to do with a lot of bad things that went on in the music industry. Here's what I say to that. If Sean Puffy Combs is guilty of the murder of Tupac Shakur or Christopher Wallace directly or indirectly, he should go to jail. But only if it has been proven, Art, in a court of law beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was involved. What I cannot support is Black people telling the racist white American criminal justice system that you can lock up one of our own, even if they are innocent, even if you have not proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that they committed the crime, you can still engage in corruption and lock up a Black person because we hold them accountable for other crimes that have either not been proven or have thoroughly disgusted us. In other words, Cassie being stomped out by Puff was wrong. It was absolutely wrong. No man should ever put their hands on a woman, but he is not being charged with that. Domestic violence is not the charge. So when I hear Black people say he should go to jail even if they can't prove the charges because he did something over here, I cannot co-sign that. Why? Because the history of the American criminal justice system, Art, is a history of Black men being convicted in the court of public opinion by white people without sufficient evidence. Look at all the Black men who've been lynched, hung. Look at the brother today, Art. We just had a Black man in Missouri. Marcellus Williams was executed 1 hour ago. 1 hour ago tonight. He was innocent. No evidence connects him to the crime, Art. No evidence. There's no physical evidence that proves Marcellus Williams broke into that white woman's home, stabbed her 43 times, left the knife in her neck, and then escaped. He was nowhere near the crime at the time it took place, from what I understand. Even the prosecuting attorney, Art, the DA, says he's now convinced that Marcellus Williams is innocent. He was fighting for him to get exonerated. And guess what the governor of Missouri said yesterday? Guess what the Supreme Court of Missouri said yesterday? We don't care. This is the prosecutor, Art. The prosecutor who convicted him said, I believe he's innocent. And the governor in the Supreme Court of Missouri said, we don't care what you think. He's going to die tomorrow, whether you like it or not. Check it out, Art. When they put the jury together for this black man, and I'm bringing this right back to Puff. When they put the jury together for this black man, there were 7 black jurors, 7 of them. The prosecution dismissed 6. They ended up with 1 black on the jury. Everybody else was white, Art. This black man was convicted. His life was sentenced to death by an all-white jury with 1 black person who was probably too scared to speak out against what the rest of the jury wanted to do. It gets worse than that. I even read that the family of the victim, and of course, our condolences go out to that woman, whether she Caucasian or not. Nobody deserves to die like that, especially not a woman. But I read that her family, Art, also is convinced of his innocence and that her family didn't want him to die. So the victim's family didn't want him to die, at least some of the members. The prosecutor don't want him to die. And then the knife, the weapon itself, Art, could not properly be tested for his DNA because the police and the prosecution who handled the weapon after the murder accidentally tainted the weapon. So they couldn't even use the knife to exonerate this black man. And it's a damn shame. He just died an hour ago. So when you hear me say, I don't want to see Puffy Combs, Dr. Umar, my brother Art, I don't want to see nobody go to jail for something they didn't do, is rooted in the criminal injustices that we as black people have been suffering from in this country for 4 sentences. I have no special loyalty to Sean Puffy Combs. I don't know him. He's never donated to my school. We never talked on the phone. It ain't got nothing personal. Don't tell white people that you don't care about justice for black people. The court is for justice. It is not for revenge. If we want to hold a tribunal for Puff, let's do it. If we want to convict Puff, let's do it. But you don't tell your enemy that you can lock up one of mine and throw away the key, even if you can't prove he's guilty, because white people have done that for 400 years. Look at Vince McMahon, Art. Look at Vince McMahon of the WWE. Vince McMahon was accused of rape and sex trafficking, okay, multiple times, allegedly. This woman says that Vince McMahon forced her to have sex with different men, different women. He defecated on her head. He defecated on her head, and while she was covered in human feces, he forced her to continue to engage in sexual trafficking. This went on for a period of time. He was never arrested. The federal government claims to be investigating Vince McMahon, but his homes have never been raided. Look at how Vince McMahon has been treated, and look at Sean Puffy Combs. Not for the sake of Puff, Art. This is not about Puff. This is a case study in how they deal with black people. I'm not thinking about Puffy. I'm thinking about my people. But the immaturity of American Africans, they can't separate subject from object. Puffy is the object. He ain't the subject. The subject is justice for black people. I will never tell the criminal justice system that you can prosecute and convict one of mine illegally without due process of law because I'm still upset over something he did over here that has nothing to do with the charges bringing him into court. I didn't read nothing about pedophilia. Nowhere in the indictment did they mention underage children. But I hear people talking about underage children. And then, Art, every time the news comes on, they keep showing us the Cassie video. Cassie got $30 million. She settled out of court. That don't excuse what he did. But she's moved on with her life, Art. So if Cassie took her $30 million back to her white husband and moved on with her life, why is C-SPAN and CNN and ABC and Fox News and NBC keep showing us the Cassie video. They keep showing us 1,000 bottles of baby oil. It's not illegal to have 1,000 bottles of baby oil. Is it a little sick? Yes. Is it ridiculous? Yes. Does it point to the fact that Sean Puffy Combs might be a sexual deviant? Hell yes. But it is not a crime. And for all the people who say he should go to jail for being a sexual deviant, you didn't say that when Hugh Hefner was in a Playboy mansion. Hugh Hefner had a living freak off through his whole career. He was never accused of interstate sex trafficking. How is Sean Puffy Combs any different than Hugh Hefner? Look at Donald Trump. Donald Trump was tried in court last year, and it was proven in a court of law that he was guilty of raping a woman. Of raping a woman. They called it sex abuse, and then the judge clarified that even though the language is sex abuse, it was in fact proven that Donald Trump raped that white woman. Why are black people still saying they're going to vote for Donald Trump? If we care about women so much, Donald Trump was held liable in court of rape last year, and you still have black people running around saying they're going to vote for Donald Trump. What about all the black children in the Roman Catholic Church who've been sex trafficked in rape? We still belong to the Roman Catholic Church. I'm trying to understand this selective morality of black people. And how dare the U.S. government try to prosecute any black person for sex abuse when you engaged in the longest, most egregious sex trafficking campaign in human history known as the African slave trade. Are you kidding me? Look at all the hundreds of women, black women, Thomas Jefferson. Look at the hundreds of black women, George Washington. Slavery was sex trafficking, and America has never paid restitution for that. But you want to go and get black people and prosecute them. I'm not against criminals being held accountable. I'm not against Sean Combs being held accountable if he is guilty. I'm simply saying to my people, let this be handled in a court of law and not in a court of public opinion. Because if we are okay with Puffy's trial being held in the court of public opinion, we can never again get angry at a group of white people who choose to lynch a black man outside of court because they have already made up their mind that he's guilty before he has been proven so in a court of law. And I'm telling you, Art, if Puff could do it over, I don't think he settles with Cassie overnight. I think he realizes when he did that, he showed his hand. Diego saw it, and they called in their favor. And I'm going to tell you something else they're doing to distract us from this presidential election, Art. The Sean Puffy Combs situation is a distraction. And I want to go to our late brother, rest in peace to him, and nothing but love and respect to his family, community. I love Memphis. It's a second home to me. And that is our brother, Young Dolph. Young Dolph was executed 3 years ago. And those who are responsible for Young Dolph's murder should be held accountable for it. But why did the power structure wait until 5 weeks before the election, 6 weeks before the election, to finally start the trial for Young Dolph's alleged murderers? Why now? Why now? Because you want to take Black America's attention off the presidential election. So you got two major trials going on right now, Art. You got the Sean Puffy Combs 3-count federal indictment, and you got the murder trial for Young Dolph. Two very popular, very successful hip-hop moguls. One murdered and the other accused of high crimes, and you're going to put them both before us 6 weeks before there's a presidential election. Tell me this isn't a scapegoat for Kamala Harris. And don't get me wrong, we can walk and chew bubble gum. We can listen to music and read the newspaper, right? I can chew and breathe at the same time. So I'm not saying we cannot pay attention to that most important Young Dolph murder trial and pay attention to the presidential race. I'm not saying we can't pay attention to the Sean Puffy Combs proceedings and pay attention to the presidential race. We can. But many of us, and I will, but many of us are too undisciplined to do that, Art. And the white power structure knows that. So what they're doing is they're bombarding us with issues and topics that they feel will be considered far more important to Black America than the presidential election. And they're doing this to suffocate the Black agenda and to give Kamala Harris some breathing room. Definitely distraction from the presidential election, brother. Think about it, Art. I can't remember the last time this many young people were this critical of the Democratic Party at the same time. Never in my lifetime. In my lifetime, I have never seen this many Black youth this critical of a Democratic presidential candidate in my life. And I'm telling you, it is giving the Democratic Party nightmares. Kamala Harris ain't got no answers at all for Black people. And as a result of that, they needed to throw us a distraction to give that woman some breathing room for these final 6 weeks of the campaign.